Now we're going to continue in this review of these fundamentals for the Sunni intellectual. We're still talking about the mind. So I'll review with you a little bit here. So the mind is one of the causes of knowledge. We talked about its two functions, how it works intuitively, and we talked about deduction. That means putting together premises and deriving conclusions. And we talked about how the religion does not depend on the mind. Rather, the religion is from God, and the mind is the witness that the religion is correct. The sound mind is a witness that the religion is correct. The sound mind looks into this religion and says, I bear witness that you are correct. I'll never forget the time when I gave da'wah to a cousin of mine. She said to me, I know what you are saying to me is correct. She said, I still want to eat pork and I don't want to cover my hair. She didn't embrace Islam. Maybe I'm going to be a witness on Judgment Day about that. And now we want to go over a benefit called here the 8 steps, or you might say the 8 points or 8 pointers. And you're going to see what that's all about now. The gist of it is that sometimes you need several steps to get to your answer. You have to build up to it. So here are 8 steps that our brothers and sisters circulate. The author says, it is true that the mind is not the reference for the sacred law. Rather, it's the revelation. But we can mentally argue for the truthfulness of such laws as the prohibition of wine, and such beliefs as the existence of paradise and hell, and the angels, for example. Why are we choosing these cases here? Because some things they have immediate answer, and some things don't have an immediate answer. If you remember, we talked about these 2 cases have a relevance, but we talked about this benefit all the way up here. So you can see we're here, benefit, the 8 steps. But if we back up, we talked about this benefit all the way up here. Benefit. Is God's existence necessarily known or inferred? Necessarily known means immediately without even thinking. So if it's immediate without thinking, that means there's not a process, there's not several steps before you get to the answer. It's immediate. It means it's very simple and basic, rudimentary. Or is it inferred? And even those who said it is inferred, which is the case of most people, inferred means deduced. The person has to think and put some facts together and come to an answer. Even in the case that it's inferred, if we say it's inferred, the scholars said very simple inference, not complicated. They said, in fact, it's so easy that some scholars thought it was necessary. Realizing or coming to the conclusion that God exists is so basic that some scholars thought it was intuitive. So these 8 steps are not for something like that simple, that basic, rather something that requires more setup, such as the prohibition of wine. We're not able to say that simply, like you say, I exist, so there must be someone who made me. You know, there's something skipped in there. I exist with the beginning, for example. But let's just say a person's just thinking simply to himself. He says, I am, so there must be someone who made me be. And that one who made me be, there couldn't have been someone who made him be, so easy to get to the bottom. But if someone says to you, what's the evidence that wine is forbidden? You're going to say the Quran. So then he could say, what's the evidence that the Quran is evidence? Same thing if someone said, what's the evidence that paradise and hell exist? So you'd say the Quran. So he could say to you, what's the evidence that the Quran is evidence? So there's a process here. Yani, more complicated process, more steps in between. That can be achieved in 8 steps. Especially since an atheist would not believe that wine is unlawful. Yani, the atheist, why would he believe that wine is unlawful? He doesn't take it from any revelation. So if you told him the Quran says so, then it's not going to be, in his own mind, proof. He's going to say to you, for example, well, you have a book, Christians have a book, Jews have a book, they have a book, those have a book, even devil worshippers have a book. So then you're going to say, yeah, but the Quran is... So that's another discussion right there, where you're talking about if wine is prohibited, and then you're going to wind up saying, but the Quran is... Thus, there is no escape from establishing several premises. Any question before we start? Is my introduction clear? Step 1, agreeing to the channels of knowledge. Now, some of this we already went over. Yani, when we first read the booklet, we talked about it. Now we're reviewing, so we talked about it again. So at this point, some of these should be known. So if you have any question for anything that I skipped, feel free to ask. But just so I don't say everything in the beginning of the book all over again, I don't have to. Step 1, agreeing to the channels of knowledge, meaning the causes of knowledge. Let's just say it that way. Asbab al-ilm, the causes of knowledge. What does that mean? What causes knowledge? It means, remember, you as a created being, your knowledge is only something possible. And in fact, each one of us was born with zero knowledge. So we need something to cause knowledge for us. We're not like God, who has eternal, beginningless knowledge, knowing everything. We actually came out not knowing anything. So step 1, agreeing to the causes of knowledge. What causes knowledge for a creation? It has already been established that there are 3 ways, 3 causes for the creature to achieve knowledge: sound senses, truthful information, and sound intellect. Now, if you have any question there, feel free. So what are we saying here? We're saying this atheist says to you, what's the proof that wine is forbidden? How are you going to address this? Or what's the proof that there's a paradise and a hell? So you could say, well, I could answer you in a way that requires a few steps. If you're willing to follow me, I'll prove to you that wine is forbidden. And I'll prove to you that paradise and hell exist. So if he says, okay, I'll go along with you. So you say to him, all right, well, first of all, then, I want us to agree about what causes knowledge. You might say, what does that even mean? What causes knowledge? So you're going to explain to him, well, you and I, we are creatures. We don't have eternal knowledge of everything. So what's going to make us have knowledge? What's going to make us know something? How's knowledge going to be caused for us? So you're going to say to him, sound senses, truthful information, and sound intellect. So maybe he'll disagree with something here or ask you for some clarity. But you don't want to move on before this is clear for him. That means if you never get past step 1, then don't try to prove to him that wine is forbidden. You might say to him, well, listen, if he's not listening to you or you can't get anywhere, you might say, I'm telling you wine's forbidden, so I advise you to believe it. Don't deny it. I got things to do. So then you need to study so that you know how to talk about sound senses and truthful information and sound intellect. So let's say he says, okay, I agree to all of that. You say to him, step two, clarification that the world is created. You say to him, well, now I want to prove to you that the world is created. So they might say, you want to prove to me the world is created? I want you to just tell me, what's your proof that wine is forbidden? Why are you going to tell me the world is created? You say to him, because if I can prove to you the world is created, that means I can prove to you that there's a creator. And maybe he'll say, you want to prove to me that there's a creator? Like I just said, I just want you to tell me how wine is forbidden. Why you want to tell me the world is created and tell me there's a creator? So then you might say to him, because the prohibition of wine is by the command of the creator. So then if he says, well, I already believe there's a creator, then you could skip this step here, which I'm still going to read it though. Or he might say to you, well, I don't believe there's a creator. Can you tell me the proof that wine is forbidden without going through all of that? And you say to him, there's no point of me telling you that. Why should I tell you that how wine is forbidden? You don't believe in God? That's unimportant in comparison. It's unimportant by comparison. So if you want to talk to me, then I'm going to talk about that God exists. If you don't want to talk about God exists, then I don't want to talk to you, because I don't want to talk about why wine is prohibited while you don't believe God exists in the first place. So he might say, okay, clarify then that the world is created. I'll go along with you. So to prove the validity of the divine laws, one must first prove the existence of God. To prove the existence of God, one must prove that the world is created. So that's clear. If you have a question, go ahead and ask. The summary of this detailed argument is coming right here. But I just want to draw to your attention. Detailed argument, as opposed to a simple argument. There's two ways to argue for the existence of God. A simple way and a detailed way. Simple way is like a person just saying, I am after I was not. So there must be someone who made me be. And you could give a person that simple argument. And those simple arguments are quite profound, especially for a person who doesn't ponder on those things a lot. But here we're going to talk about the detailed argument, the summary of this detailed argument, the detailed argument that the world is created, is that the world is a conglomeration of volumes that are proven to be created because they are bound to created qualities. There. Now it's italicized. That's the summary of the detailed argument. If you want to prove that the world is created, you start from here. Conceive this. The world is a conglomeration of volumes that are proven to be created because they are bound to created qualities. And I like the word properties better. What does that mean? Conglomeration means collection. A bunch of things together. The world is a conglomeration. The world is a bunch of things together, like all of what you see around you. A conglomeration of volumes. Volume means what takes up space. So this world, there's trees, there's street, there's cars, there's air, there's light. The world is a conglomeration of volumes, things that take up space. So supposing the person you're talking to right there cut you off, say, hey, oh, wait, hold on a second. That just because the world is a conglomeration of volumes doesn't mean that it's created, though. Yeah, sure, the world is a conglomeration of volumes. I agree. That doesn't mean it's created, though. So you say, wait, you cut me off. The world is a conglomeration of volumes that are proven to be created because they are bound to created properties. Volumes that are proven to be created because they are bound to created properties. You might say, what does that mean? You say, this means all these volumes that you just agreed with me about, don't they have properties like some of them are soft and some of them are hard? Some of them are like shiny, for example. Some of them are not shiny. Some of them are big or some of them are small. And they have different colors. All these properties, some of them are moving, some of them are still. This is what I mean by properties. The movement is a property. The stillness is a property of something that's filling up a space. The color, the temperature, the texture, all these qualities that don't fill their own space. So let's say he says, okay, I understand what property means. So you say to him, okay, so the world is a conglomeration, a collection of volumes of things that fill space. The world is a collection of things that fill space. And these things that fill space, you might say, wait, you still didn't prove that it's created, though. So wait, you cut me off again. These things that fill space, what proves that they are created is that they are bound to created properties. They might say, okay, I understand what property means, but what does this mean? They are bound to created properties. Say, okay, bound means stuck to. So, for example, something that fills a space. Take your pencil, for example. Either it's moving or it's still, right? So let's say he just thinks about it. He says, either it's moving or it's still. Then maybe he wants to try to find a way to disagree with you. He can't find a way here. Either it's moving or it's still. Okay. Yeah, okay, yeah. So, I mean, do you have a question or something? It's not clear? No, it's clear. Okay, so you have a pencil. So, for example, either it's moving or it's still. Right? Yeah, okay, yeah. All right, so don't you know that the movement is something that has a beginning? And stillness also is something that has a beginning? Maybe he doesn't know. He possibly didn't think of these things before. It's not familiar to him. So maybe he might scratch his head, say, what do you mean? Say, look, here's your pencil. So if I pick it up, if I take it from this spot and put it on the other spot, it just moved, right? I say, yes. Say, okay. Didn't that movement right there have a beginning? Didn't you see it start? He say, yes. Say, okay, that's what I'm saying. Movement has a beginning, right? Says, okay, yeah. You say, okay. And then after I moved it and then I stopped moving it, it became still, right? You say, yes. Say, okay, so stillness has a beginning too, right? So you have to say yes. Say, okay, so movement has a beginning and stillness has a beginning. And this volume, which is your pen, cannot escape either of these. It's bound to these. Can you find a third circumstance for this pen that's neither movement nor stillness? Can you confirm this pen without movement or stillness? And he has to say, no, I can't. I can't confirm this pen without movement or stillness. Say, okay. So that's what it means to say that it's bound to this created property. Do you know what created means? Created means has a beginning. So let me read something here. It says, to prove the validity of the divine laws, one must first prove the existence of God. Okay. To prove the existence of God, one must prove that the world is created. Okay. You might even have to explain to a person what created means. Maybe he doesn't know. Say, do you even know what created means? I mean, I took it for granted that it's clear for you, but do you know what created even means? Maybe you'd say, tell me. Say, okay, created means having a beginning. I'm telling you, the world is created. That means the world has a beginning. Has a beginning means started, has a start, has a beginning. It's something that happened. It's an occurrence. It wasn't always existing. So let's say he says, okay, yeah, that's clear. I understand. So you say, okay, so what I'm saying to you is this pen here is bound to created properties. And I just gave you two examples, motion and stillness. Motion is a created property, and stillness is a created property. Do you understand what that means? Created means has a beginning. Property means it exists by extension of this thing that has volume, doesn't exist by itself. The movement is not just going to exist by itself, and the stillness is not just going to exist by itself. It's the volume that is moving or still. The thing that has volume, the object that is moving or still. So the movement has a beginning, and the stillness has a beginning, right? So let's say he says, yes, that's right. Say, okay. Can this pen be neither moving nor still? So let's say he understands. So he says, no, it can't be. So you say to him, therefore, this pen has a beginning too. The pen itself has a beginning, just like its movement has a beginning and its stillness has a beginning. Why? Because, here's the answer. If the volumes are created, and no, that's not the answer. Why? Because the movement is stuck. The movement and the stillness are stuck to this pen. The pen can't escape them. And they both have a beginning. Both qualities have a beginning, and the pen cannot escape either one of them. So the pen itself has to have a beginning. It's impossible that this pen could exist before motion and stillness. Both of them. Do you understand? So let's say he says, okay, yeah, I understand. Say, okay. And what I just told you now about the pen is true about everything in the universe. What I just told you is true about everything in the universe. So, if the quality of the thing that fills the space has a beginning, and the thing that fills the space cannot escape this quality, then it means this thing that fills the space has a beginning too. And then we continue. If the volumes are created and the qualities are created, that's what we just now proved. We just now proved that the objects that fill a space are created and their qualities are created, then the universe in total, the whole world, which is a conglomeration of volumes, in total, it is created. So you say, do you agree? You're not going to ask him that expecting him to say blasphemy. You're asking him that so that you know how to proceed. Because maybe he's not going to say blasphemy. Maybe he's going to say, yeah, I agree. Okay. All right. So then the world is created. Then that means there has to be a creator. But here's the statement here. Proving that the world is created may require debunking the idea of a beginningless chain. The beginningless chain, which is going backwards beginninglessly, that's impossible. Proving that the world is created might possibly require debunking the idea of a beginningless chain, but we're not going to talk about the beginningless chain now. We have a space for that later. Any questions so far? Step 3, proving the existence of the creator. If one can successfully prove that the world is created, he can easily prove that it has a creator. His premise should be every doing has a doer. So that's clear. So then you say to him, okay, so the world is created. Now you disagree with me. So if the world is created, that means it has a beginning. It couldn't have given itself that beginning. Anything that has a beginning couldn't have given itself that beginning. So then it needs something else. It needs other than itself, right? So what if he said, I don't agree? Then you might say to him, so you agree that the world has a beginning, that it is created, but you don't agree that it needs other than itself to come into existence? That makes no sense. You might say, well, I mean, didn't you ever hear about the Big Bang? You say to him, Big Bang is unverified. You might say, well, how are you going to say it's unverified? For me, I'd say to him, can you verify it right now for me? He can't do it. So if he says no, I say, all right then, you can't do it. You can't verify it. It's not verified. So what is verified for the both of us that the world has a beginning? So it's already clear that you're not a person who believes that the world is beginningless. You're not one of those guys who believes in the beginningless chain. But you think that the world could just happen from nothing? Yani, by nothing? And by the way, don't forget, that's the meaning of the ayah. Am khuliqu min ghayri shay'. Were they created from nothing? What this means here is, were they created by nothing? Were they created by nothing? And what that means is they are created. So that was not by anything to create them. So right here, if he's stuck here, then don't try to prove to him wine is forbidden. And he's stuck believing that the world could start without a starter. That the world could commence without an event creator. So one's premise should be every doing has a doer. If something has a beginning, it couldn't have made itself start. If you're going to be stuck there, then that's too bad for you. That's not even something that you can replicate or prove in any way. Why would you believe that? Every doing has a doer. You might say, if he's a very stubborn one, when you say every doing has a doer, he might say, well, who created God? Now, if he said that, if you said to him, every doing has a doer, so he said, then who created God? That means he understands what you're saying. Because this statement, every doing has a doer, he understands that it means every creation, it includes, say, every creation has a creator. Yani, he understands it to the point that he can replace the words in the sentence. So the words you said to him was, every doing has a doer. And then he says to you, for example, well, who created God? He's using the word created in response to a sentence that has the word do. This means he understands what you are saying, but he doesn't want to accept. Let me know if that's not clear for you, please. You say to him, this is confirmed. You are the one who cannot disprove that every doing has a doer. You can't prove that something that has a beginning could happen without something to make it start. And you can't disprove that every doing has a doer. So if you're stuck here, then I'm not going to try to prove to you that wine is forbidden. I'm going to end this conversation with you now. So let's say he agrees. Say, yeah, every doing needs a doer. Everything that has a beginning couldn't have made itself happen. So you say to him, okay. Step 4, proving God's uniqueness. If the opponent is not an atheist, skip to the 4th step. For usually non-Muslims who confirm the existence of God make comparisons for God. So you don't have to prove that God exists. He already agrees that God exists. Don't go proving something that you already agree about. I had a debate with the Wahhabi. I told him, most of the ayahs of the Quran are muhkam. He said, yeah, I agree. I said, okay. He said, can you give me proofs for it? I told him, I don't have to give you any proofs for it. Yeah, and I already gave him the ayah. I gave him the proof for it already. Minhu ayatun muhkamat hunna ummul kitab. Here, this is the proof. Hunna ummul kitab. The explicit verses are ummul kitab. That means they are the reference for the other verses of the Quran, and they are the majority of verses. He said, yeah, I agree. He said, can you prove it? Give me references. I told him, I don't have to. You already agreed with me. Yani, I wanted to get somewhere else with him. That's why. The point I'm making to you is, if you already agree with somebody about something, you don't have to go prove it for him and give him examples and stuff that he already submits to. I said to him, why are you going to make me go through all of that and you agree with me anyway? Let's talk about such and such. So if the opponent is not an atheist, skip to the fourth step. For usually non-Muslims who confirm the existence of God make comparisons for God. So you're not going to have to prove to him that God exists. You're going to have to prove to him that God does not resemble the creations. So then let's say he's a non-Muslim who confirms the existence of God, and he wants you to prove to him that wine is forbidden. So if he said to me, oh Muslim, what's your evidence that wine is forbidden? I might say to him, well, do you even know that God is unique? He has no similarity. So if he were to say, what does that have to do with wine being prohibited? Then I might say to him, this is more important than that. You want me to tell you how to prove that wine is prohibited? Well, the Quran proves that. So if you believe in the Quran, then that's fine. The proof is the Quran. So let's say he says, that's what I thought you're going to say. The proof is in the Quran, but this Quran of yours, what's your evidence that the Quran is evidence? So I'd say to him, that's why I wasn't even going to go into this conversation with you there. That's why I asked you, instead of trying to prove to you that wine is forbidden, I asked you if you know that God is unique. So if he says, what does it matter if I believe or know that God is unique or not? Say to him, because why would you believe that wine is forbidden if you don't believe in God? So if you say, well, I do believe in God though. So you say, but you don't believe in God properly. This is more important for you. So if he says, I don't want to talk about if God is unique. I want to talk about if wine is forbidden. I'm going to say to him, for me there, I don't want to talk about if wine is forbidden with you. I'd rather talk about the fact that God is unique. So if you don't want to talk to me, I don't have to talk to you. But let's say he says, okay, yeah, God is unique. Say, okay. Step 5, proving the existence of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. To prove the validity of the religious law, one must prove the validity of prophethood, because the prophet is the deliverer of the news. Before proving the validity of Muhammad's prophethood, one may need to prove his existence. Its evidence is successive mass narration. The prophet's existence, the evidence for the prophet's existence, is tawatur. We learned about tawatur already. Very important case that you need to get strong in. If you're a da'i, if you like to talk to people about Islam, if you like to have answers for people, then it's important for you to understand tawatur thoroughly. Once I had a conversation with a person. Now, I don't remember all of how the conversation went, but I was calling this person to Islam, and this person was asking me questions. What the person was trying to do was pick apart what I was saying. So anything I said, if they could find a question, they asked the question. It's the way to try to pick apart what I'm saying, to pull it apart, to dismantle it. So then that question, I have an answer for it. So this question, they try to dismantle it. So they try to find some way to answer it. some way to ask a question, rather. They try to find out of my answers some question because they're trying to dismantle what I'm saying. And I flowed with this person until we came to the question came to, and really her questions were reasonable. Her questions were reasonable because she's trying to find a way to disprove me. So she actually is asking the right questions, just maybe not with the right intention. Until her questioning brought me to, she asked me, and what if something happened that's not in the Quran or in the statements of Prophet Muhammad? So my answer to her was, then there are scholars, they're called mujtahids. And they have the qualification to deduce judgments for cases that will come later using the Quran and the Sunnah. Then she stopped asking me questions and she became disinterested in the conversation altogether because she wasn't asking me so that she could ascertain the truth and then become a Muslimah. Why I just told you this story? Because here, to prove the validity of the religious law, because you want to tell this person that wine is forbidden, one must prove the validity of prophethood. And before proving the validity of Muhammad's prophethood, one might need to prove his existence. You would meet a person here or there who says, how do you know Muhammad even existed? Maybe you met someone like that. So its evidence is successive mass narration. Yani, you're trying to prove that wine is prohibited. You talked with this person until you got to talking about prophethood. So he questions you about the prophethood. So you say to him, well, Muhammad was the last prophet. So then he questions you about Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he might even say, well, how do you know he existed? So then you're going to tell him his existence is proven by successive mass narration. And maybe he even understands these words. Let's say he doesn't want to accept. And you say his evidence, his existence is proven by successive mass narration. He might understand what you mean there. Like he gets a gist for the words you're using. Then he might, for example, not want to talk to you anymore. Or he might say, what's that? So then you need to explain to him what it is, what successive mass narration is, and then work backwards. Say, okay, successive mass narration. Okay, that's clear? Tawatur is clear? You say, okay, so then that's how we knew Muhammad existed. Okay, so what I'm telling you is Muhammad was a prophet. What is a prophet? A prophet is someone who has prophethood. Prophethood is, if you want, it's an office that is granted to some of the slaves of Allah from God himself. It's a position. It's a God-given position, prophethood. So you prove then that Muhammad exists. So he says, okay, Muhammad existed. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Okay, Muhammad existed. But how do you know he was a prophet? Step 6, proving that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is God's messenger. The way to prove his prophethood is to prove that he did miracles. And their evidence is also successive mass narration. That's how you're going to prove miracles. The miracles of the Prophet. Remember, his performance of miracles in general means when you add up all the instances, all the isolated instances of his doing supernatural feats, when you total them, their total is itself a successive mass narration. Even if one by one they were isolated incidents witnessed by one person or 2 people or 3 people, for example, or 5 people or more or less. And some of his miracles on an individual basis were themselves reported by successive mass narration. So his general performance of supernatural feats, miracles, it is in totality a successive mass narration. And some of those supernatural feats were individually successive mass reports, like the water springing from between his fingers and the moaning tree stump. Now, you're basically trying to impose on this person that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the prophet. You might say, I don't believe in Muhammad, but can you prove to me that wine is forbidden without that? So for me, I'd say to him, no. Prophet Muhammad's conveyance is the evidence. So then you need to know that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. What can I say to prove it to you? Do you have a question that I can answer for you? So maybe he'll say, no, I don't. So that means he doesn't want to know. So, oh, all right. Well, know that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. No one is God but Allah. And Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And wine is forbidden. See you around. So let's say that he at least will follow your reasoning here. Say, okay, you're still trying to prove to me that wine is forbidden. I'm still with you here. You sure are long-winded, though. You couldn't just tell me why wine is forbidden? So you're going to say to him, no, look at all we had to go through here. Why would you believe anything that I have to say to you about wine being forbidden before all of the things that we just had to straighten out? So if he says, okay, so supposing Muhammad is God's messenger, then what? Step 7, proving Muhammad's truthfulness, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The supernatural feat performed by someone who claims prophethood without possibly being opposed by something similar is as if Allah said, my slave is truthful in everything he conveyed from me, or else I would not have made this miracle happen for him. This is because whoever deems a liar truthful is a liar. And it is impossible that Allah would be a liar. Yani, what we're saying here is, so if we want to suppose Prophet Muhammad is the messenger, then it means we're going to suppose that he is truthful. And what proves his truthfulness is his performance of miracles. It is not possible for a liar to perform a miracle. And he performed miracles, so he wasn't a liar. Or else there would be no way to distinguish the honest one from the liar. If a false prophet could perform a miracle, and a real prophet could perform a miracle, then there wouldn't be any way to know a real prophet. And then we wouldn't be obligated to believe in him. Now there's a question he could pose here. He could say to you, wait a minute, I know what you believe. Don't you believe that God misguides whomever he wills? So for me, I'd say, yeah, that's true. So he might say, so if God misguides whomever he wills, why do you think it's impossible that a false prophet could perform a miracle? Why isn't it that he could enable a false prophet to perform a miracle so to misguide the creations? And then, yeah, it would be true that you can't tell the difference between a true prophet and a false one. Because Allah is the one who misguides whomever he wills anyway. If he wills to guide you, you will follow the true prophet. And if he wills to misguide you, you will follow the false prophet. So what's your answer going to be to that? Answer to that is, Allah said, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not make anyone accountable to do but what they are able to do. Allah does not make you accountable to do what you are unable to do. And he did make us accountable to believe in the prophets. And if it were possible for a false prophet to perform a miracle, then we would not be able to know a real prophet from a false prophet. And if we're not able to know a real prophet from a false prophet, we would not be accountable to believe in a prophet, because Allah doesn't make us accountable for what we're not able to do. That's what the ayah says. So this ayah is evidence actually by deduction. If you think and go through enough steps, you're going to use this ayah. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not make anyone obligated to do but what they're able to do. You're going to use this ayah to eventually, through the right steps, arrive at the fact that a false prophet, it is impossible that a false prophet could perform a miracle. Or else, if it were possible for a false prophet to perform a miracle, it, then it would be possible that Allah makes us accountable to do something that we're unable to do. That's at the end of Surah Al-Baqarah. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. That's the last ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah. It is possible, though, that a false prophet perform a supernatural feat that backfires. Here. So we're not saying that a false prophet can't do something supernatural. We're saying he can't do a miracle. But if this supernatural feat backfires, then that's not a miracle. What does it mean for a supernatural feat to backfire? Like for the false prophet to say to someone, the proof that I'm a prophet is that this stone shall speak. And then the stone says, you are a liar. So didn't the stone speak? It did. But did it prove that he's a prophet? No, because it belied him. So that means it backfired. This is possible for a false prophet to do a supernatural feat that backfires. And step 8 is proving the truthfulness of the Quran. By proving that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is truthful in all that he conveyed, one proves that the Quran is truthful, and therein is the confirmation of paradise and hell, as well as the prohibition of wine and other matters, and Allah gives the success. Subhanallahi wa bihamdi. Any question? So what type of impossibility is that going to be? That a false prophet doing a miracle is impossible. What kind of impossibility is that? That's a religious impossibility. Barakallahu feekum.